Hey everyone, welcome to the channel where we talk about all things movies. Welcome especially if you're new. If you love talking about movies and staying up to speed on what's worth checking out, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my videos. Alright, we just wrapped up, or we are wrapping up the last weekend of June, so that means it's time for another Movies Monthly, and this time it's June 2022 edition. So just for those of you who are new here, just to give an overview of what a Movies Monthly looks like, we start off with a tiered list, or a tier ranking of the movies that I saw in theaters for the last month. And then we discuss any of the movies or TV shows that I watched at home, and then we go into some soundtrack recommendations, and finally the any physical media that I picked up over the month. In this case, it's Steelbooks specifically. So that gives you an overview. With that, we're going to jump right on into the first section. So first up, we are going to do a tiered list for the month of June. And this is all the movies that I saw in theaters. So this month I saw 9 things in theaters. I've done individual reviews for all these, so be sure to go check those out in the 2022 movie reviews playlist on my channel for my full thoughts on each of these. This is just going to be a brief recap and just kind of a reflection on the month and potentially changing some of the letter grades. I'm still kind of trying to figure out exactly how to grade things, and kind of my perception of what each tier means changes a little bit from time to time, but I think I've locked it in, and it's something I've been thinking about the last couple days. So I think some of the letter grades from my earlier reviews in the month, or even in the last few days, may change just based off of how I think I want to do the tiered system moving forward. But with that, we'll start with, and this is just going in order of the ones that I saw. So up first we have Benediction, and this was a film that hadn't heard of before I went to go see it. For me it was a boring film. I didn't particularly enjoy it. I mean, I say this with like an asterisk on any movie that I see. I appreciate the hard work that goes into making a movie, and all the people involved in that process. So I hate saying that I didn't enjoy a movie, but this one was very meh for me. I do recognize it's based off of a real person, but that, like, in and of itself shouldn't and doesn't really influence my enjoyment of a film. But yeah, this is one that I can't say that I recommend. If But yeah, with that, we'll move on to Watcher. This was a horror film, and it was more of like a suspense film. It wasn't really horror. It was like thriller, maybe, if I understand the distinction correctly. But this one almost was in the meh category for me, but I liked where they ended the film. So it was a B tier. So I guess before we maybe get too far into this, to describe my current tiered system. So going from the bottom up, C is very meh. Like, those are films that I don't recommend seeing. It's not, some of them, it's not that they're bad films, it's just very meh, so I wouldn't recommend, one way or the other sometimes. But for it to be in the B tier, it means that I enjoyed the film and I think it's worth checking out. But that's still, like, there's going to be a lot of movies in the B category. I think that's where most movies start, and then depending on how they go, they can move up or down. It's kind of mentally where I'm at with the movie to begin with. So if I think a movie is fun enough, or if it's worth checking out, maybe a one-time watch, or maybe should have been I was expecting it to be a much better movie, but it kind of came up short. Things like that I put in the B category. So I think, yeah, like I said, that's kind of the average movie's going to go there. A means that it's a great movie. It's one that I really liked or potentially loved, and it's clearly above B. Like, I'll enjoy a lot of movies, and there's a lot of movies I enjoy in the B category. A is ones that I really liked. And then S tier is basically cream of the crop, my absolute favorite films, and those don't come along all that often. So that's kind of the tier system. I think I have a clear picture of it, and I like the picture that I have for that. So, like, moving forward, when I'm assigning letter grades for films, that's the template that I'm using. So Yeah, B is a recommended, worth the watch. A is something I'm gonna recommend and highly recommend, and I think S is basically a must see to kind of correlate those. But with that, we'll move on to the next one, which is Crimes of the Future. This was, I'm kind of torn between this one. I think I put it originally in the B tier, and reflecting back, I don't know that it was all that like noteworthy of a film, so I'm leaning towards dropping it down to the meh category. But I think it did enough interesting things where it's not a great movie, but it was good. It was worth the watch if you think it's your type of movie. It's directed by Cronenberg, so it's that sort of movie from what I understand, although I don't know much of his stuff. So I put that in the B category. Like it was done well enough, and I wasn't bored throughout. It's usually a movie that has me bored. That's what gets into the C category. So like I said, B is very average. I think there's something there that's worth checking out, but not necessarily like a high recommendation. Next up, we have Jurassic World Dominion. I believe I originally gave this film a C. I was very meh coming out of it. And on further reflection, I think I was grading it very harshly. I'm like, this isn't as good as the original Jurassic World, but that's like easily an A tier movie. Probably not an S tier, mainly just because I grew up on it, but not enough where it's in that S tier for me. And I didn't see it in theaters when it released. I think that sort of experience could get the original into an S tier. But at the end of the day, this was a fun film. There is a lot of stuff to nitpick as far as things not really making sense, and a lot of holes that I was poking in the story. And so that kind of took me out of the film. But I think that aside, it was a fun film, and it's one that I think is worth checking out. I know a lot of people are checking it out. It's a Jurassic movie at the end of the day. But I'm actually going to bump that one up to a B tier. Because it was an enjoyable enough time. While I was finding holes in the script and like poking fun at it, it was still humorous at the same time. And yeah, while it wasn't like the best dinosaur movie I've ever seen, it was still enjoyable. Next up, we have Lightyear. This one I enjoyed quite a bit, mainly I think because I can relate a lot to Buzz and the way they did his character in that film. And so I think, like, objectively, this is probably a B tier movie, but for me and my experience with it, I put it into the A category just because I connected a lot with it. I think it is a fun film. I'm not 100% sure why it seems to be very polarizing, or like people either really like it or they don't, or like they dislike it and they're unhappy with the direction that the movie went. I think that's that's what's splitting people, where this isn't really the Buzz. It's not a one-to-one with the Buzz that we get in Toy Story. It goes its own way, and if you assume that this comes first, which the movie poses that this movie came out and then the Buzz Lightyear toy in the Toy Story movies is based off of this. So like any kind of merchandising, you can get differences in the toys and things like that, or they'll drop things and like lines in the toys that maybe don't line up perfectly with the movie and stuff like that. So maybe that's what people were just looking for, a different movie, and were upset that they got this one. I've been there. I like from the month of May, that is very much, I think, like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Like I had my expectations for that film, and they didn't really go the way that I wanted, so that lessened my experience of it. So everyone is entitled to their own opinion. Obviously, that's the great joy of movies, is we all have different experiences with them, and sometimes we like ones better than the others. Next up, we have Brian and Charles. This was a fun film. It seemed like it was just based off of a short story. I think I mentioned in my review, like the first 20 minutes of it was very solid in my opinion, and then I thought Acts 2 and 3 weren't as good, but it was still a fun and enjoyable film. So I put that in the B tier. And moving on, we'll go to Elvis. This one I just saw a couple days ago, so I'm kind of on the fence. I think the acting in the film is phenomenal. And I think maybe like objectively the film is like I think technically it's very good. But for my personal enjoyment of it, I originally gave it an A kind of for all that technical achievement. And I think maybe objectively it's an A, but like subjectively for my own personal experience and enjoyment of it, I think I'm leaning more towards the B category, and I'm just trying to filter out like the bias that might have been there. Like, oh, this seems like an awards contender, so I should put it up higher. I'm like, just because I think something's an awards contender doesn't mean that I should put it higher in my own list. So I'm gonna put that in the B category. Like, I wouldn't highly recommend it, but I thought it was worth the watch, which is what the B category is for. Now I think it's basically the best one in the B category for what we had this month, and like Jurassic World I think is pretty close to the bottom, so there's a good enough range in there. But Elvis I thought was I go back and forth. I do think it's kind of on another level though, and it's closer to Lightyear than it is the others. I don't know, I get torn between these things. No, okay. There are parts of it that I'm gonna put it in the A tier. So the reason I'm putting it in the A tier is I enjoy the fact that it's a tragedy, and it's a tragedy that's done well, and we don't get many of those. So when they come along, I personally actually enjoy those quite a bit more. So that aspect of it being well done is what appeals to me and puts it into the A tier for me. What was a little hard, like placing these, is Black Phone, because this was, I felt like Black Phone was a lot better than Elvis, and I saw those both on the same night. I saw them back to back, and I think I initially put Black Phone in the S tier, but while I really liked it, it's not one of my favorite films. It is probably one of my most enjoyed horror films, but horror films just don't have anything on some of the other genres of films that I like. So while I really like this, and I think I initially put it in S, I think it's very, very high A tier. And I think whereas like I think Elvis is kind of low A tier, Black Phone is high A tier, and I highly recommend it. I don't know, yeah, it's very close though. But for me, I think I'm going to, in this ranking, err on the side of it has to be clear that it goes into a category that it goes into. Although I was kind of on the fence with Elvis, but I talked myself into it, and that one is a bit more clear now, especially looking at the other movies that are in the B tier. Like for here, there's I think a clear distinction, and these movies all belong in the tiers that they're in. Last up, we have The Phantom of the Open, and this I just got back from seeing, so this is just a couple hours old for me and my experience with it. But this was solidly a B movie. It was a lot of fun. It had some good writing. I think it's on the same level as like Brian and Charles, and it's that sort of a film where if you're just looking for a fun time at the movies, but also get a little bit of heartfelt sort of moments throughout, I think that's what it's a good movie for that. So yeah, that is my current ranking. This will probably fluctuate. If I look back at this at the end of the year, some of these might change. That's the other beauty of movies, is it's not a set point in time, and it doesn't, your perception of, or your enjoyment of a film and your evaluation of it can change over time, especially if you see it again, or as you're kind of putting it in context of other movies, especially when we're doing a tier ranking. But that does it for my list, my tier ranking for the month of June. If you've seen any of these movies, or if you've seen ones that I haven't seen, although I think I've seen all the ones that released, I could be wrong, but at least in my area, I think I caught them all. But if you saw any new movies in theaters this month, or if you've seen any of these, I'd love to hear your rankings down in the comments below. Did you get any S tiers this month, and which of them were your A tiers especially? Like which are the films that you really liked this month? I'd love to hear it in the comments below. So next up, we move on to the movies and TV shows that I watched at home. And so this is anything that I watched at home. I'm just sharing, what I'm watching. A lot of these are things I'm watching for the first time, but I also include things that I've rewatched, mainly just as a way to talk about the things that I enjoy. If I'm rewatching something, it's because I enjoyed it and I want to watch it again. So, but yeah, with that, we will start off with Moon Knight. I actually watched this in May, but I forgot to include it in last month's Movies Monthly. So I wanted to include it here. So this is a month old, but I haven't talked about it yet, so I wanted to share my thoughts. This this show I thought had an amazing first episode. I was hooked, and I really liked the first episode of this show. And I'll talk at a high level, so I won't go into spoilers. I'll try not to anyway. Um, but yeah, the first episode of this show was really good, and then the rest of the show was, I thought, fine. I'm trying to think if it's. I'm going between a good and a meh. I think for this one it was good. It's a little bit removed now, so I'm trying to recall back. But I think mainly the seeing Oscar Isaac in the role was very. I thought he did a very good job, and I can't really. I don't want to go into spoilers in case you haven't seen it. But if you haven't seen it, we're like 2 months past, so what are you waiting for? Unless you're waiting for my recommendation. I think this is like an average Marvel Netflix show, maybe on the lower end. Not sorry, Netflix. Average Marvel Disney Plus show, if not kind of on the lower end. There are aspects of the show that I liked, and there are other ones that I didn't like. I think if you're a Marvel fan, it's worth the watch. If not, if you're not really keeping up on things, it's probably not worth the watch in my opinion. So I'm a Marvel fan though, so I'm gonna give it the good tier. And again, so I'm gonna assign it that with the asterisk that if you're not a Marvel fan, it's probably in the meh category. Next up, we have Obi-Wan Kenobi. This is a 6-episode series on Disney Plus, and I was really looking forward to this film. If you tuned in for last month's Movies Monthly, you know that I was really looking forward to this show. And well, I think it started in May, and then it wrapped up this month. So Obi-Wan is my favorite character, especially the prequel version of Obi-Wan in all of Star Wars. I love the character, so I was super excited for this series and to see his character back. So, with that, it's thoroughly disappointing that this show was very meh for me. I think it had some moments in it, but it's not one that I can say, yeah, I'd recommend and it's worth the watch. There again, if you're a Star Wars fan, it's and you're keeping up on things, well, okay, then you're gonna watch it anyway. But for me, yeah, the show just didn't really click. There are a lot of holes, in my opinion, in the story, and just left me scratching my head, like, how did this get past the writing phase? So while I love seeing Ewan McGregor back, unfortunately, he was in a show that wasn't all that good. So I wish I could say better things about it. It had a couple good moments. I will give it that. But overall, as a show, it was very meh, and it's not one that I can say I recommend. Next up, we have The Fallout. I think, let's see, a few of the next movies I saw just on a plane. So I know that can kind of shape your experience. But for The Fallout, Snowpiercer, and Jumanji, I saw all those on the plane for the first time. I was doing some traveling this last month. And we'll talk about those, but I would say just keep in mind it's a different experience when you're watching something on a plane as opposed to at home. In my case, I have a projector and nice enough home theater, so it's a very different experience. But The Fallout, I thought was a good movie. I don't know, I think it's solidly a good movie. It was interesting because I watched it. I think it was like the weekend after we had, I think it was the shooting in Texas, and I watched that on the plane, and it was very, ironic's not quite the word, but it was very strange, like one in a million coincidence that I watched that movie at that time when that was very relevant. I mean, it's a relevant topic in general, so I think approaching the topic of like gun violence and what that does to the victims and the survivors and that sort of thing, I thought was really interesting. It reminded me a bit of Mass from last year as far as tackling this sort of subject matter. But while I thought Mass was a great movie, probably one of my favorite movies just for how it was done and everything, this I thought was good, and I thought the actors that they got and the actresses did a good job. I was really annoyed by the younger sister's character. Like, she just came across as very annoying, but I think that's how she's supposed to be. And so I thought she was acted well, even though I was just annoyed at her. But they resolved that by the end and kind of gave her a reason why. But yeah, the Fallout though I thought was worth checking out. Next up we have Snowpiercer. This movie, I would say for the first like third, seemed like it was going to be very meh, possibly good, but by the end of the film, it became for me a great film. I really enjoyed it. It's yeah, the second half seems just, I think, very different than the first half, but it's a slightly depressing film. I'm not gonna lie, but I think it's done in a good way, and I don't like I don't need every movie to be happy go lucky. So the yeah, I thought it was well done. There's like a couple nitpicks that I had, like they very clearly. So Chris Evans is the main character, and he's playing a character who's presumably basically starving. But they just like dress him in a very thick coat the whole time to basically hide the fact that he was in very good shape to be playing Captain America at the same time. So there's like little things like that. But overall, it was a really interesting movie, and I really liked how it's a movie that kind of reveals things stepwise as you go through. So you're kind of just dropped into this world, and you're like having to figure it out. And they give you little breadcrumbs along the way, and then you know, revealing more stuff as you go on. So that was fun to watch. Next up, we have A Beautiful Mind. I hadn't seen so far. All this stuff is new. I hadn't seen any of this before. Same thing. So A Beautiful Mind. I've been trying, like, on my movie watch list. What I currently have is I want to get through all of the Best Picture winners since the year I was born, which is 1996. I at least want to check all of those off, and then when I get through those, I might go back and try to check off all the Best Picture nominees and then mix in some other suggestions. But at a bare minimum, I want to do all the Best Picture winners, and I think I was about halfway through at the beginning of this month. I think I had 13. And now I watched, A Beautiful Mind and No Country for Old Men, so I'm up to, I think, 15. But I think I'll try to do maybe a couple a month is my goal. But A Beautiful Mind is my first time seeing it. I thought it was a good film. I think some of these here again, I think the circumstances in which you watch something can greatly shape your opinion of it. I can see why it won Best Picture. But for me and like my personal taste, it's not a great film. It's not my favorite film, but it was good and it was worth the watch. And that's all I'm gonna say, because there's potential as spoilers. So the stuff you could spoil about it, I really liked, without going into any detail. So if you know, you know. But yeah, on to Jumanji. This was like sort of entertaining. I can see how it was fun, or I can see why people liked it, but for me it was pretty meh seeing it now, years later. I don't know that I could say it's worth the watch. I'm not upset that I watched it, but it was definitely a meh film, and I think it's the type of movie that, you know, is very appropriate for its time. I'm not surprised. I think I would have liked it a lot more if I was maybe younger when I saw it, or if I saw it when it came out. But yeah, nothing against it, but that's just where I'm at in my life at this point. Next up, we have No Country for Old Men. Here again, working my way through the list of Best Picture winners, and I would say this was a good film. The reason I don't have it like better than good, I think there are elements, or is potentially a film that I would have really liked or had as a great film, but at the end of the day, I think it just, the story just like, I don't know. It didn't impact me as much as I would want a film, like a great film to. So it was worth the watch. It wasn't bad. There's a lot of good elements in it, but not one that I would say I highly recommend. I think there's better stuff out there. And there again, but maybe it's just, it probably felt a lot more fresh when it came out, but like I've seen, it reminded me a bit of like Breaking Bad and elements of that, which is newer than this movie. So I might have had a different opinion if I saw it when it came out. But right now, at this point, it's a good movie. I think it's worth the watch if you haven't seen it. And then last up is The Adventures of Tintin. This is one that I have seen before. I rewatched it. I actually had my cousin and her husband were visiting, and we watched that. I've got a 3D projector, so we watched it in 3D, and neither of them had seen it before, and they both really liked it. And yeah, I highly recommend that movie. I saw it in theaters way back when it came out. I think it's 2012, maybe 2011-ish. It's like 10 years old at this point, but the animation's really good. The story is pretty good. It feels very much like, you know, Indiana Jones, National Treasure, but still its own thing. It's Tintin, and I wish they would make a sequel to this. I heard their original plans were Steven Spielberg was going to do the first one, and then Peter Jackson was going to do the second one, but because Peter Jackson produced the first one, but they haven't made a second one. So I don't know what's up with that. I would love to see a second one, even though we're a decade past when it released. You can still do it. It's just got to get everyone on board that was involved. So that's what I watched this month, though, for at home. I'd love to hear what you've been watching at home. I have a couple shows that I'm like most of the way through, but I will wait until I finish them up. And so those will probably come up next month. I think Ms. Marvel is one. The Boys is another. We've got Westworld starting up tonight, actually, so that I'm excited for. And I think I'm working my way through a season of Fargo. But anyway, we won't talk about those now, and they'll come up in the next Movies Monthly or whenever I finish those. But yeah, let me know what you've been watching, especially for the TV shows. If you've seen any of these, I know it's a long list, so if you want, you know, if one of these is like your favorite movie, I'd love to, you know, hear share your thoughts on it in the comments below. And then next up, we will move on to soundtrack recommendations. This is usually when I do soundtrack recommendations, but looking back on the last month, I actually didn't listen to any new soundtracks. It's been a pretty busy month, and then none of the films that I saw jumped out at me as having really good soundtracks. I think I need to go back. I think some of them do have good enough soundtracks. I'm going to see which ones are available, but that was something I didn't get around to. I was mostly listening to my old soundtrack playlist and not checking out new stuff. But if any of the new movies this month did have a good soundtrack that you listen to, I'd love to hear it, put that on my radar if it somehow should be on my radar and isn't. But with that, we will move on to the Steelbook section. I'll just switch the view here. So for this section, as you can see on the wall behind me, I collect Steelbooks of movies. And so what I'm going to do moving forward is any new Steelbooks that I get or as they're released, because I get a lot of them on release date, I'll talk about the new ones that I get in this section, and then afterwards I'll put them on the wall, kind of where you can see it right now. There's the Black Panther is about there, and then we've got West Side Story, and then on the other side we've got Maleficent. So I'll put them in that general area, mainly because the movies above that on the wall, those are kind of sets, and I'm going to keep those in place for the time being. But I'll circulate through kind of, on the bottom of the frame there, the ones that are newer, so we get a little bit of variety in the background. But I'm just going to, if you're interested, feel free to stick around. If not, you can skip ahead. But I really love Steelbooks, and, I buy a lot of physical media. And at this point, I like the artwork of the Steelbooks, so it's not going to be like an unboxing video. I've already opened them, but I'll just go through and show you the artwork, and and then we'll get them up on the wall after the video. So first up we have, and there's two of these that I didn't pick up this last month in June, but I think they were in May, and this was just to round out so I can get 6 new ones to put on the wall where we can kind of see the most prominently displayed movies. But this one is Uncharted. This was a fun film. It wasn't like my favorite film, but it had interesting artwork, so that's what mainly interested me to pick it up. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have gotten it on release day. But that one I thought was some creative artwork. Not like my favorite artwork ever, but it's certainly unique as far as Steelbooks go, and I'm happy to have it in the collection. And then next up we have the Batman. And I like the design on this. It's very simplistic. I mean, part of me wants to see a bit more, but I like seeing the question mark blend into Batman's head, and then that's the back. So the front's definitely a lot better than the back. Sometimes you get a lot better artwork on the backs than the fronts, or at least relatively better than other movies. But this was one of my favorite movies of the year, so I was really excited to get my hands on this. I almost didn't because like Best Buy, I guess, had a problem. I think I moved since I pre-ordered this thing or something like that, and had to change my billing address, and so that made like the payment not go through when they released it. So they canceled my order, and then at that point, it wasn't available on their website, at least not readily available. So I got lucky because I was checking very frequently, and yeah, found one time when I checked in, it was available to add, so I added it to my cart and was able to get it. Even so, fortunately, was not at the mercy of the scalpers for that. Okay, next up, we have Old. This is a film from last year, and pretty similar front and back. Getting a little bit of the reflection of my screen on there. But this is a movie that I haven't seen, but it was on sale, and I like the artwork, so I figured I'd pick it up, get the chance to see it, and yeah, so I'm sure that'll pop up at some point in my Movies Monthly at Home section. And then next up we have The Matrix. This is a little hard to see. It's catching some light. There's not a whole lot of art here. There's it's mostly black, and then you got some of the designs trickling down, and then the back. So it's a nice enough one. I didn't buy this on release. The movie was fine, and the artwork didn't blow me away. So I got it on sale though. I think it was like, yeah. Anyway, so when I saw it on sale, I liked it enough to pick it up at that point, so that's why I got it this month as opposed to a few months ago. And then lastly, we have The Hurt Locker. I have not seen this film. It's one of the Best Picture winners that is on my list to check out. We have the front and the back. But so I now have it. This released, I think, a few months ago or something like that. But because I hadn't seen it, I wasn't going to pick it up on like release date. And then, but it went on sale this last month, so I'm like, it's a Best Picture winner. The artwork looks really, really good, in my opinion. I really like the front. Very, very stylized, and a lot more. It's very creative as far as a steelbook goes. So figured I'd pick it up, and hoping it's a good movie. But we will. If it's a Best Picture winner, I'm sure it's a good movie. We'll see how much I like it though when I get around to watching it. All right, so that does it for the physical media that I picked up in the last month, and then a couple in May. And we'll get those up on the wall. Otherwise, we will transition to the last segment here, which is looking ahead. Or I guess before we transition, let me know if you enjoy steelbooks, if you have steelbooks yourself, or that sort of thing. If you got any in the last month, especially any maybe harder finds or that sort of thing, I'd love to hear it in the comments below. And with that, we will jump into the last section, which is looking ahead to the month of July. What am I looking forward to as we go into the next month? Well, I think there's basically 3 movies that I'm fairly aware of coming out this month. There's Minions: The Rise of Gru, Nope, and Thor: Love and Thunder. And I'm not the biggest Despicable Me fan. I feel like we've had enough of it. So I'll go see the film, but I'm not expecting much out of it. Nope, I've had several people tell me that they're super excited for this film, but I'm personally not. I haven't seen much, if any, of Jordan Peele's work. So I'm sure I'll go check it out, and hopefully this will be something that makes me a fan of his. But at this point, it's not that I don't think it looks good. It's just it hasn't sold me on it yet. But I'm definitely looking forward to Thor: Love and Thunder, though. That looks like it's going to be great. I love what Taika Waititi did with Thor Ragnarok, so I'm excited to see where he goes in this new film. That is probably one of my most anticipated films for the rest of the year, actually, at this point. So super excited for that. I think that's just 2 weeks away at this point. But otherwise, I think I listed off in the previous section kind of the shows that I'm wrapping up. Technically, it starts today, which we're just at the end of June, but the Westworld is starting up its 4th season, I believe. I love that show. I am super excited for the new season. And then, season finale for The Boys is coming up. We got Ms. Marvel. doing, I think they're getting into their second half of the season. So lots of TV going on right now. Oh, and how can I forget Stranger Things? The season finale for season 4, it drops on the 1st, I believe. So lots of, I think it's going to be a pretty bloated section next month for things that I watched at home, and I'm hoping it's a lot of good stuff. So let me know what you're looking forward to though most out of July in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and just, yeah, see what everyone's looking forward to. But with that, though, that brings us to the end of this Movies Monthly. We had a lot to discuss. There wasn't a ton for theaters, but I watched a fair amount of movies at home. And then, yeah, added in the Steelbooks this time around. So, yeah, we'll get those on the wall. And, yeah, on anything that you want to share your thoughts on, I am always open for recommendations on new shows, new movies. Can't promise that I'll get around to them, but I love hearing recommendations. And just, yeah, because I think there's so much content out there, it's really hard to discover all of it. And so I think a lot of it has to go through word of mouth. And yeah, so any recommendations you have, feel free to drop those in the comments below. I will at least consider adding it to my watch list, but that is a fairly long list. But it may line up with one that's already on there. So I try to balance it out though, and add in some new recommendations. But at the end of the day, we don't have time to watch everything that is worth checking out, unfortunately. Maybe one day I can retire and just watch movies all day. But with that, thank you so much for being here through this Movies Monthly. If you enjoy these videos, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe. I think it's a great way to end the month, and thanks for being here. I like having these discussions, and we will catch you at the end of the next month or in the next review. Until then, take care, and thanks for watching.